Okay, it's good enough crowd. Probably we can start now. Welcome everyone to the Climate and Energy College and the Energy Transition Hub for this seminar today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and work and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. I'm Shantanu, a researcher here at the Hub at the University of Melbourne. So this seminar is brought to you by the Energy Transition Hub and graciously sponsored by the Victorian Clean Technology Fund here. You can see the banners here. And it's a part of the Climate and Australian and Germany Climate and Energy College. So renewable energy is the topic of our discussion today. And as we know that renewable energy is actually an integral part of the future energy grid. However, the integration has a huge problem, especially the renewable energy coming from the solar and wind. They have the intermittency in nature, and that actually create a lots of voltage and frequency fluctuations. So that net needs to be tackled from the policy to the power electronics part. So to tell you more about that, we have here with us Dr. Manoj Datta, a lecturer from the RMIT University. So Dr. Datta has over 10 years of experience in the industry, working in different parts of the microgrid and smart grid. And he led several government and industry collaboration projects on smart microgrid. So he has published over 70 peer-reviewed journal and conference papers, and is a regular reviewer of the major journals in power and energy domains. So he was one of the keynote speakers in the IEEE Compel 2012, and he has chaired sessions in the IEEE ISGT, IEEE EPCS, and IEEE ECC Asia Conference. So it's my pleasure to introduce you, Dr. Manoj Datta. Please give him a good hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Shantanu. I'm a bit nervous. It's an honor to present in front of such a great audience. I'm no expert. I kind of did a little bit of research in the smart grid and renewable energy integration domain. And I would like to share my experiences with you today, especially the part of the research which relates to the Australian grid and Australian probably energy politics, also some of the blackout incidents which occurred in Australia. And we're going to see how the grid code can help us. Also, is it renewable energy to blame for those sort of incidents? So before going forward, I would like to go a little backward. Is it this side? No. Okay. So if you believe in climate change and global warming like me, you should speak out. So that's why I put this code. And there are a couple of references here. One from the Australian, one from the Herald Sun, and a couple of other websites. All of them run serious propaganda against renewable energy. If you go to these websites, even those newspapers, and read the articles, your skin will crawl the way they try to really go against the renewable energy. So just to give you a little reading materials when you have time to go with this. So before we go to that renewable energy integration part, every integration challenge of renewable energy kind of related to two elements, real power and reactive power. In traditional sense, real power relates to the frequency, 50 Hz in our Australian system, and reactive power relates to the voltage control. I kind of give an analogy here with the beer glass, like what part is the real power and what part is the reactive power, and also with my favorite player from the footy. So he can throw the footy a little far, but if he kick, it can go very far away, like in an arc. That arc is our reactive power, which helps our real power or electron to send very long distance. And that direction we call high voltage transmission lines. So this is the old way. I modified it for the Australian power system. On the reds, you can see the generation station, usually 11 kilovolt. We have a lot of coal power generation. Usually we burn coal, produce the steam, run the steam turbine, connect the synchronous generator, step up this voltage to all the way to 500 kilovolt to something like 130 kilovolt, and then slowly step down, bring it to 66 kV, 22 kV, 6.6 kV or 11 kV, and all the way to 415 volt line to line. And from those plugs, you get 230 volt line to neutral. Problem is, everything is one-way direction. All the current in the old system, old school, all these power system engineers we have mostly learn to control the power system in a one-way direction. And if you see how the power and voltage relationship work, I give you a simple example. So that's 11 kV, let's say 45.5 ampere. If we step up, we can go to 500 volt, 1 ampere. We'll step down 220 kV, 2.27 ampere. Again, a step down 66 kV, 7.58 ampere. Coming to 22 kV and 22.7 ampere. And then when we come most lowest voltage level, 11 kV, 45.4 ampere, and all the way 415 volt and 1205 ampere. One of the most important equipment in this equation is the transformer, which has the on-load tap changing capacity. And this is the transformer which usually control 11 kV volt, and all this solar coming from the rooftop, utilities are complaining about the problems. The major player will be this step-down transformer with the OLTC capacity. How does a smart grid look like, and what's the vision of a smart grid? If we put a lot of data sensing, IoT, and also renewable energy, power electronic converters, we are envisioning something like power and information bidirectional flow. So it goes both ways. Now I put a simple definition here. Around 2008, US power system engineers and the policymakers was thinking to revolutionize the power system, and they were planning to put a proposal in front of the senators. But those guys don't know technical jargon. That time they coined the term smart grid. Even before that, in Europe, a lot of smart grid activities were going on, but nobody really used that word, smart grid, even before that 2008. And the NIST in USA and IEEE together somehow come with a framework. I put a simple definition of a smart grid, which basically saying like generate and distributing electricity effectively, economically, securely, and sustainably. And in doing so, we will be using innovative tools, sensing, we'll give greater choices to the customers, we'll also ensure their energy security, which many times we fail in Australia to do, especially in summer, sometimes even in winter. This is the first framework, came from the NIST, and you can see, that's the operation, market, transmission, generation, distribution, customers, and service provider. So in Australia, we all complain why our electricity bills are going up. Is it to blame the government? Is it to blame the renewable energy? Or is it to blame the policymakers? Who should we blame? Well, the interesting thing, the way the transmission system is charged, also the distribution assets, almost 80% of the electricity cost you pay goes to transmission system operators and the distribution assets. Interestingly, for example, if your distributors are transferring 700 megawatt in the morning through transmission highways, and in the evening, let's say just for 10 minutes in the peak load time, they transferred 800 megawatt, you're gonna pay for that 800 megawatt. There is no real-time pricing in the transmission system highway. There is also no real-time pricing in the distribution systems. You pay a fixed price, but all those distributors are buying power real time. Every 5-minute auction cycle in the power market, and every 30 minutes fixing the price. But you are getting a fixed price. So this is the power generation domain where we are envisioning rooftop PV as well as larger scale CHP. Hydro we already have in Australia. We're also planning pumped hydro. We don't have any nuclear. Some geothermal and biomass going on, and a lot of ocean current activities and ocean power capture going on in Western Australia. So in the distribution domain, if we look for the smart grid, we can go with the control, measurement, protection, and obviously recording. Transmission domain is the most vital part for Australia. It's a large country, all the way from the Cairns to the South Australia. When I teach my students, I say Australia is a combination of 3 countries in the sense of power. Because you have one country from Cairns all the way to South Australia, that's your power market. Whole Western Australia is separate country based on their power, and Northern Territory is also separate. So in a power sense, we have like 3 countries, but the power market is only running from Queensland to South Australia. And these transmission systems are muscles because it's a very large country. We really need to have long distance transmission lines. Investments are huge on those long distance transmission lines. Almost 5 or 6 years ago, you could have get 13% return on your investment. Still, you could get 9 to 10% return on your investment. One of the highest profit giving investment you can do. And that's one reason your transmission system cost is never really going down. And a couple of the assets are owned by some other countries too. Next, come to the distribution. This is where the customers get really important. We can put distribution storages, we can put innovative technologies, we can really make the whole system visible. Now in Victoria, although Victoria lead in the energy innovation long time ago, around 1995, Victoria created a deregulated electricity market. But the whole Victoria is divided in 5 monopoly zones, and 5 companies are controlling every distribution. There is really virtually no competition between them. Although we say it's a deregulated market, but it's not really that much deregulation going on. Now here where we have our power, if we choose right, the customer domain, we have the, we have the home domain where really a lot of revolution going on with the rooftop solar and battery. We also have industrial domain, not much, but some of the industries are going on renewable and the battery, and building and commercial domain, which is Monash already created a microgrid, a big size microgrid, and Monash is going to play on that. So I don't know about RMIT, I don't know about the Melbourne, but Monash already created their university microgrid and they will participate in the market very soon. So we have a greater options. And in the middle, as you see, we have an electric vehicle sitting in the middle. In future, I believe electric vehicle will be the major transportation mode. And the amazing capacity of electric vehicle, it could be your spinning reserve. You could start your vehicle in the morning, come and park in Melbourne University, and on the roof, probably there are some solar charging your vehicle. You can go back home in the evening and discharge your vehicle power to your home to reduce the peak load. And these vehicles together with large fleet could be your spinning reserves moving around. In Ireland, I have seen in 2013, throughout the Ireland, they installed 600 electric vehicle charging stations. That was in 2013. So energy market operation and service providers domain, that's where a lot of things went wrong. So this is the market. Our market runs every 5 minutes auction, generally they have to give their future 5-minute output, 30 minutes output, as well as next day output. But this is a challenge for renewable because as they are variable in nature, unless you have good prediction technology and storage, your wind and your PV cannot say what they're going to produce in the next 5 minutes or next 30 minutes or next 1 day. Interestingly, CSIRO created a neural network-based estimation program for the wind turbines of whole Australia, which helps the wind turbine generators to participate in the market based on the 5 minutes, 30 minutes, and 1 day estimation technology. However, they took almost $5 million so far, couldn't create a better estimation technology for rooftop PV because they are so distributed. The customer loads vary so much, it's almost impossible to estimate the combined output of thousands, millions of rooftop solar, which going to come after 5 minutes or 30 minutes or 1 day. So that's a big challenge. This is to show the operation of the market in Australia. MO usually look after the operation of the markets. And we also have the service provider. This is kind of a thing. In reality, in Australia, the service providers you see come to your door or you contact are your retailers. But actually behind those retailers, there are distributors who really maintains your distribution asset. Those outside poles, transformers, distribution lines you have seen, all are paid from our tax money. And it's a regulation that you can't go really off-grid from that line, even if you want to. You have to remain connected. For example, if I shut down all our loads in my residential household, how much electricity bill are you going to pay? Anyone can answer that? We stopped all the loads in our house. How much electricity bill are you going to pay? That's about right. Because per day, you're going to pay $1 for the service charge, even if you don't use a small bit of electricity. Because you're paying for that distribution asset sitting outside. So we're going to see a video which is made by Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany to better explain you how the whole smart grid works. It's going to take around 7.5 minutes. By the way, I'm Mac illiterate, so I really can't handle MacBook. Here it's coming. Just full screen, please. Yep, and click here and then start the tour.
Climate change, the growing demand for energy, and the increasing scarcity of fossil fuels present us with great challenges. As a result, we have to pursue innovative policy approaches. Government, business, and society must quickly adopt new ways of thinking. For the future, we face the urgent task of finding and optimizing solutions that will deliver a secure, affordable, and environment-friendly supply of energy. This is the world of e-energy. Smart grids made in Germany. Here you see a typical scenario of how electricity is supplied today. There is a large-scale power plant in the background on the left and a hydroelectric power plant in the background on the right. These plants supply power to the city in the foreground, as well as the village and the industrial facility in the background. There are also a few individual wind turbines in the sea. In this scene, electricity consumption is high. That's why the pumped storage plant on the right side of the picture is contributing to the power supply. It's now nighttime and electricity consumption is low. The hydropower plant's turbines are at rest, and power from the large-scale power station is being used to pump water into the pumped storage reservoir. Now it is daytime again. As you can see, the wind turbine in the foreground is standing still. It can't feed any electricity into the grid because the transmission lines are basically full. Either other power generators would have to feed less power into the system, or other nearby electricity buyers would have to buy the wind power. But these buyers are not aware of this surplus electricity. Now, so-called e-energy gateways have been installed in various locations. These gateways are devices that allow electricity producers and consumers to communicate with each other. The transmission and communication lines marked in red form the foundation for an energy internet. The cold store in the city now receives the information that surplus electricity is available and starts to cool. This is depicted by the ice crystal on its roof. But much more important, now the wind turbine is rotating. Now more gateways have been installed. The installations in the village now communicate with those in the city. Almost all of the houses now have smart meters. For example, the house in the foreground now reports its consumption levels to a central data collection center, which in turn sends clear information back to the owners of the house regarding their electricity consumption. But why hasn't anything changed in the energy landscape? The electricity suppliers are now offering electricity at new rates. The price of electricity rises when too much power is being consumed, at lunchtime, for example. And the price goes down when a lot of solar or wind energy is in the system. The gateways send corresponding price signals to customers who can then regulate their consumption accordingly by turning their appliances on or off. And because this enables power generation to be coordinated much more closely with consumption levels, there are now more wind turbines and solar power installations. As a result, one power plant unit can be switched off intermittently. Now everyone can select the price rate that best fits his or her level of consumption. And if a provider does not offer the desired rate, consumers can now shop around for alternatives on the new e-energy market. Proactive consumers take advantage of these price rates and adapt their consumption to power supply levels. This makes it possible to switch off the pumped storage plant intermittently as well. But not much has changed yet in the energy landscape. Why is this the case? New price rates by themselves don't really do that much to change the system. Therefore, in order to encourage customers to get actively involved, we have added non-price incentives to our energy internet. Attractively designed websites provide customers with tips on how to save electricity. They can adjust their heating systems remotely and can use their mobile phones to check whether or not their stoves have been turned off. Because more and more customers are taking advantage of the opportunities offered by the energy internet, it has been possible to build more renewable energy installations. And our homeowner has now even purchased an electric car, which he can charge at lunchtime using solar power. The public awareness campaign to encourage people to use electric vehicles has created so many incentives that even more people have now bought electric cars. The cars are charged at the charging station in the middle of the picture. But apparently the battery charging system has not been optimally coordinated with the availability of renewable power. Otherwise, why would the third wind turbine in the foreground be standing still? Now is the time when a crucial element of the e-energy system comes into play. A new market participant called the bundler or aggregator enters the scene. This aggregator can pool small, decentralized electricity generators into larger units. It can turn specific installations on and off, transmit electricity to consumers at the right point in time, and sell surplus electricity to exchanges for a good price. This enables the owners of such installations to become genuine market participants. In this way, the aggregators create new incentives for the decentralized production of renewable energy. That's why another solar power unit has been installed in the background, and the homeowner has purchased a small combined heat and power generator. But why isn't it operating? Now it's raining. The solar installations are not producing any power. But look, the aggregator has switched on our homeowner's small power generator as an additional energy source. And even the electric car knows that electricity is needed, so it's now feeding power from its battery into the grid. The home power generator and the electric car are now earning money for their owner through the energy internet. It's now nighttime in our beautiful new energy landscape. The home CHP generator is running because heat is needed. The electricity it generates is being used to charge the electric car. The wind turbines are producing more power than is needed right now. This surplus power is being fed into the pumped storage unit as well as the batteries of the electric cars at the charging station. And the cold store is operating at full power too. This e-energy landscape shows what the energy supply of the future can look like. Now you can push the buttons yourself. Discover.
Okay, so this is I think, a great video to explain you how the smart grid could work. I just give you one idea how you could start your business or become an aggregator. How about we rent all the roofs of CBD buildings, put rooftop solar, and sell in a cheaper rate to that building. Toshiba did that in Netherlands. Also, they're planning to do it in Germany. It's just giving one idea, but you can have many other ideas of becoming an aggregator. How about we offer better energy security to South Yarra, East Melbourne, and Toorak? They have a bit of financial capacity. They will like the energy security and give them an independent microgrid concept. So if anything happened to the central grid, South Yarra, Toorak, and East Melbourne remain on their own and can survive in a concept of microgrid, having their own rooftop solar, backup generators, and batteries. So there are so many ways the jobs, aggregation, and all other things can be done. And that's the amazing nature of the smart grid. So this is Australian energy network. You can see the electricity network and gas network, and you can see the total energy production in 2017 and 2016 time. Unfortunately, 77% energy came from coal. So surely Australia loves coal. Black coal, brown coal. I also have coal. I call it yellow coal. And that's my yellow coal. And interestingly, it produces both solar energy and wind energy. That's fine, and they are infinite. And what's the problem with that? Why we really go against them? Is they really that bad? Is the technology is that bad? So I call solar PVs are really dumb. One reason, you put 1000 watt per meter square of photo energy and you probably get 230 watt per meter square of electrical energy. That's 23% efficient solar cell. That's quite good. If you go to the market and you want to buy a 23% efficient solar cell, it's going to cost a lot. Usually you get around 17 to 16% efficient solar cell. But that's one problem. And then if the weather changes, for example, sunny, cloudy, very cloudy, the maximum power coming from these PVs are also changing, which means you need some sort of devices or something to track this maximum power point, because they are so dumb, they can't produce maximum power on their own, which means you need another extra device to do this tracking. Also, it changes based on the temperature, but somehow the temperature helps. So if you have a minus temperature and very sunny weather, actually they're going to produce more energy. So that's good. What's the other problem? So this is a real output of a solar insolation or solar irradiance of a cloudy day, and you can see that whole lot of fluctuations happening throughout the day. If we dump this energy to the grid, we might face crazy frequency deviation. We don't know. Energy storage could help, but what size of energy storage are you going to put there? Small, big, medium? How are you going to decide that? What about night? There is no solar energy at night. And how this sort of solar farm going to participate in the energy market unless they can say what they produce every 5 minutes next, 30 minutes next, or 1 day ahead? There is no way they can really participate in the market. And okay, fine, that was utility scale. What's the problem with the rooftop? So if you see this graph here, considering from that 2011 to 2018, the number of installation kind of remained flat through 2013 to 2018. However, the size really increased. It went to that average 8 kilowatt size, which means someone is one unit, but they're buying a bigger size. Long time ago, around 2011 and 2012, a lot of installation were very smaller size. What sort of problem it's creating? Well, I'm not going to run this video because I'm running short. So this is the old way. You have the external grid, your 22 kV transformer, which can do tap changing sitting there, distribution lines coming in, customer 1, customer 2. And as the cable length increases, voltage drop. The reason is simple. These cables are mainly resistive. So if you have an active power flow through the resistive lines, you're going to get voltage drops. So the last house at the streets are probably getting around 207 or 210 volt, and the most nearest house to the transformer probably getting around 240, 245. So if the voltage is really going below the acceptable range, in Australia, the regulation is plus 10%, minus 5%. You can go down minus 5% from the standard, you can go up 10% from the standard. So you can simply increase the tap there, go for 105% tap, and kind of pull the voltage up, because that transformer increasing the tap can pull the voltage up. So this was very fine before. The old way, everything was running smooth, no problem at all. Then we create the trouble. We put rooftop solar. Somehow the OLTC is still helping us, but we got a new sort of trouble now. If we are having very high feeding coming from the rooftop solar, the voltage goes up, not down. That's the trouble, because those inverters we use in the rooftop solar are kind of dumb. In a normal sense, current flows from higher potential to lower potential. So which means if you want to inject power from your house to the grid, probably the line is about sometimes 50 meters, sometimes 100 meters, sometimes maybe shorter than that. So at that point of inverter, you have to raise your voltage a little bit, and the line side or the pole side, the voltage will be a little lower. So from house, the power going to go to the grid. Now, when you are consuming power from the grid side voltage is going to go up, and your house side voltage is going to go a little down. So you have constant voltage going up and down happening around the whole customer feeder. Now, how are you going to handle that? You can easily do if you have a smart inverter which can control the reactive power, can act like a capacitor, can act like a resistor, can act like an inductor, and a smart inverter can do anything. The problem is, if you buy a Chinese inverter, it probably will cost you 2 kilowatt, 1.5 grand. If you buy a smart inverter which is made in Germany or even USA, that's going to cost you 8 to 9 grand. Who's going to pay for that? So this is one incident which happened in Germany around 2006, 2008 time, and that time Germany changed their grid code. They called it 50.2 hertz incident. So from 2003 to 2008 time, Germany really put a lot of solar incentives, and so many rooftop solar came in. And that created a substantial energy generation part from the Germans' energy mix. The regulation or grid code was that time, if they are overproducing the power, as the more power is coming to the system, frequency is going up. That time, they will be disconnected. And what happened around July 2006, as so many solar powers are injecting to the grid, suddenly the grid frequency went to the 50.2 hertz, and huge chunk of solar generation got disconnected from the grid, because that was the regulation. And that created a big imbalance between the supply and demand, creating an under frequency as well as a transient, which spread throughout the European grid. And after that, they call it 50.2 hertz incident, and they really changed the German grid code. Another case which is very funny happened in California, green energy storage incentive. So California put this mandated in 2013, saying if you were selling green energy to the grid, you're going to get good incentives. Now, if you see here the structure, PV panels, MPPT, battery, DC-DC converter connecting to the inverter, in this structure, that battery can only be charged with the PV power. there is no way that battery can be charged by the grid. Now, if you connect the battery this way with a DC-AC bidirectional converter, that battery could be charged by the PV power as well as the grid power. So the debate was, without checking the technology, they created the regulation, and they couldn't know the customer is selling the battery power charged by the direct utility grid or charged by the PV. So they said, okay, we can accept this if two conditions is met. Condition one, the storage device only store energy produced by the renewable energy system, or the storage device only serves the customer loads, which created a lot of fuss, and they changed the regulation and the policy. So that's another problem. Now, this is what about wind energy. Our former treasurer really hated wind energy. He used to say wind energy are the works of devil. And this is what gave them a good chance to shout. 2014, July 20, around 2 p.m. for 2 hours, there was almost no wind power output in the whole Australia. The reason is it was a very cold day, and the wind was blowing very low, like 3 meters per second or 2 meters per second. Even though wind turbines is producing some power, those power goes to cover the losses of wind generation and all other things. And the combined power came was zero. And everybody jumped on the bandwagon of saying, wind powers are nuts. We can never rely on them. If we put our country in the fate of these guys, we are doomed. And even a Herald Sun reporter who is very famous really go against wind turbine and wrote a perfectly fine scientific looking report, although have so many holes. You can read them there. Now we put a big battery storage in South Australia, and wind turbine can never come with a situation like this anymore. But that was in 2014. Now again, South Australia, 2016, blackout. Again, wind power fails. So a tornado came, one transmission line's tripped. Suddenly, 6 or 7 voltage dips came in, and all those old technology of wind turbines shut down. As they shut down, they created a huge energy imbalance between the supply and demand, creating very much bigger under frequency, which tripped other generators too. And the whole South Australia went to blackout. Interestingly, our biggest authority, MO, never did even simulated a scenario where repetitive grid faults can occur to the system. All their simulation they done before is only for one fault. But when a big fault occurs, it actually reflects throughout the grid, and it can repeat one after another like aftershocks. They never did a simulation like that. They even never knew that many of these wind turbine settings were not correct. Those settings were not ready to handle fault right through. Interestingly, even before this, around 2015, I had students working with me about the repetitive grid faults and how to ride them, even before these incidents. Again, recent, Queensland, South Australia system separation on 25 August 2018. Partially, PV and wind are blamed for not helping. So if you see on this right-hand side, you have two interconnectors between Queensland and New South Wales. One is called QNI, and then you have another two interconnector between South Australia and Victoria. One is really famous, Haywood, and then you have Tasmania and Victoria Basslink. So what happened on that QNI? There was a lightning strike, and as the lightning strike came, somehow the QNI tripped. So that time Queensland was supplying power to New South Wales. As suddenly that line tripped, Queensland has oversupply, frequency went up. New South Wales got undersupply, frequency went down, and they got a lot of load shedding. Similar things impacted the Basslink in Tasmania, because there is a frequency controller on Basslink. As Victoria was also having power shortage, Basslink suddenly tried to supply a lot of power to Victoria. So some of the load in Tasmania, which were under agreement, went under sharing. So this was response very quickly. Meanwhile, also South Australia was supplying power to Victoria. As Australia sensed that fault, they somehow tripped the Haywood interconnector, and South Australia got a lot of oversupply and frequency went up. So Victoria and New South Wales frequency went down under supply. Queensland and South Australia frequency went up oversupply. And somehow they come up with this analysis and all other things, telling that, okay, synchronous generation was not responding well to the frequency scenario. How they're going to respond? A coal turbine based generator cannot increase power so quickly. It takes a little bit of time. Only gas turbine based generators can increase the power quickly to support a frequency incident. Still, it takes 20 to 22 seconds. Then they said, okay, wind power generation were not really helping. A couple of the wind turbine generations shut down in South Australia because none of these wind turbine generators are designed to meet grid codes because we don't have a damn grid codes. Then we talked to the utility scale PV generation. Somehow that helped in Queensland to curtail the extra power, as well as also helped in South Australia to curtail some extra power and reducing that over frequency. And this large scale battery storage, which just installed by Tesla a couple of years ago, really helped the frequency incident a lot. That's what they believe, something good news. Okay, so fine, these were some of the challenges. What sort of grid codes we are looking around? I usually cover all the countries around the Europe and other parts, but today I will be focusing only on Germany and Australia. So this is kind of a snapshot of grid codes available around the world. So this is the German scenario. We got like 30 gigawatt of PV, 30 gigawatt of wind, 60 gigawatt of renewable, total generation 172 gigawatt, maximum load 80 gigawatt. Kind of old information, they are changing every day. So what sort of grid codes they have? First, power curtailment to control the local overload condition. Somehow the wind PV power generation should be ready to curtail their power to match the load, as well as frequency support. That 50.2 hertz incident, they really remember that. So the PV power should be able to reduce the active power. Voltage support, going in the capacitive mode or inductive mode or resistive mode to support the reactive power in the grid, so there is no voltage problem. As well as fault write-through, which is very important for us when we get a fault in the grid. This is the fault write-through scenario. So if a fault occurs, if there is a short circuit fault, every current going to be sucked to the ground, and voltage is going to go to the zero from the nominal voltage. So for 150 milliseconds, you have chance to support that fault, trying to hold that arc rather than it's going down, try to hold it as much as possible. So somehow the system remain connected. You got only 150 milliseconds, you're going to inject as much reactive power as you can to the grid at that time. And if somehow fault recover within that, you will come. But it's still 150 milliseconds, you have to remain connected to the grid. You can't be disconnected. We don't have that in Australia yet. As well as playing on the capacitive and reactive part of the grid. If too much voltage is rising in the grid, you can act like an inductor, consume some reactive power, and make the voltage down. If voltage is going too much low in the grid, you can act like a capacitor, inject a little bit of reactive power from your inverter, and raise the voltage. So you can go with this range. And the frequency control, as they have phased that 50.2 hertz frequency based on the oversupply of PV power, all these things should be taken into account. So this is the wind turbine FRT requirements all over the Europe. I just put it together, and everything follows same sort of 150 millisecond guideline to react to the fault. Now, the Australian scenario, we have 12 gigawatt of PV, 6 gigawatt of wind, 18 gigawatt of renewable, 54 gigawatt of total capacity, and 35 gigawatt of maximum load. 95% of PV is actually connected to the low voltage grid. And this was our standard 2005, long time ago. We updated in 2015 only the inverter requirements for the PV, and any other small generators you connect there. And this is the only LVRT and HVRT we have for the wind turbine, one for the Western Power, another for the NO, almost similar to the European grid, but a little different timeline. 0.45 seconds we have time to response, and for the over voltage we have around 0.06 second and 0.98 second. And this is what in the 2015 S4777, the reactive power control from the inverter to response to the voltage. Also the voltage transient, how you're going to respond to that, which is the kind of a voltage flicker in the distribution grid. So I'm going quickly for some mitigation strategy. SPY research I did. So if we optimize the reactive power resources, communicate with the transformer, capacitor banks, and PV inverter, and distribute the reactive power properly, we can achieve something like that overall the grid, where the voltages are all doing pretty good. Also, we can go to the virtual power plant. They just started in Australia now. I did this research in 2011. This is coming from my 2011 presentation slide. So you can run the PV with an energy storage, kind of like a synchronous generator, emulating the response of synchronous generator. That's what we call virtual power plant. And you can combine hundreds or 200s of virtual power plant together to respond to frequency. You can model them in the whole systems. You can see that they are working pretty fine. That's where Tesla got the lead. They are doing it in South Australia. But I kind of did it in 2011. The paper is published in 2012. But I'm happy to see that it's coming around. If a wind turbine, you can do this sort of fault right through. This is my students' research where you can jump through the repetitive grid fault. Not a problem at all if you properly design, even without the energy storage. You can jump through the repetitive grid fault based on the controller of your inverter. You can also do a bit of frequency support based on the inertial power extracting from the wind turbine's shaft and generator shaft. It will slow down the wind turbine, but you can extract some energy, as well as you can extract energy from the capacitor between the two back-to-back inverter. Overall, this can support around 3 to 4 seconds of frequency response in the system. Quite good for gas turbine generator to start, and also the big energy storage to come into play. So I'll be giving some simple recommendation based on this, like our grid codes need to be modified, especially they are quite backdated and they need to catch up. So also when we work, policymakers, academics, government, everybody need to sit down together, be on the same page and decide the fate of the country rather than being politically biased or doing whatever they want to do. Technology already picked up a long time ago. We need to embrace those technology and we really need to increase the public awareness. Real-time transmission system and supply charge are a must if we want to reduce electricity price. We pay them as a fixed now. If we are given those transmission line and supply charge as a real time based on the energy we use, we could reduce our electricity price. Optimal size of transmission level storages as well as cheaper residential storage. Once the residential storage become cheaper, everything will change. Pumped hydro has a great potential in Australia, and we have a couple of locations. But the only problem with pumped hydro, they can respond to secondary and tertiary frequency control, the slower. They can't really respond very quickly. We need something to cover the primary frequency response within 0 to 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Well, that's all. And you have another presentation coming on July 16 from Professor Andreas Hussel, the energy transition and politics of coal in Germany. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Manoj, for the nice presentation. Now the floor is open for the questions. Please state your name and affiliation before you ask a question. Thank you. Please raise your hands, of course. Thank you.
William Wood retired. Sorry, William Wood retired. What happened to the design and planning departments when the market started? All this stuff used to be covered by engineering standards in the past. What happened?
I don't know. I really don't know what went there. I think what we have is the electricity rules, which is designed by the AER, and then the operation rules designed by the MO. But the way the technology and these regulations are done, they never really see each other. That's what I see so far.
Well, it's true, when the market started, code was written, and once upon a time there was no code. Everything was done to engineering standards, and the engineering standards were common. And it's wrong to say that there were never any rapid successive faults in power systems, because in the UK they had freezing fog. In South Africa you get massive lightning storms between Johannesburg and Pretoria. There are an infinite number of records.
I completely agree. But what I was saying, they didn't test how the wind turbine going to respond to those repetitive faults, not the other synchronous generators. That's they know very well.
That's a modeling problem.
Yes.
And there are huge modeling systems behind every grid. If the wind turbines were left out of the modeling, that again is a lack of planning and design.
I have no one to blame.
With this problem, by the way, I'm an ex-power system operator, and I've seen all this stuff over and over and over and over since the New York blackouts and everything else.
Yes.
And I think the modern system is atrocious. I have no other word for it.
Maybe, but also there was something I represented this year to one of the conference, that we have a theory of natural synchronization. If everything in the power system, whatever you see going nuts, if the proper control frequency is chosen for them, eventually they will come to the synchronization. The problem is how to choose them, when to choose them, and how to activate them.
I would like to suggest that if the Protection Coordination Department no longer exists, the systems will go black.
They exist and they face the most hardest task. I have a couple of friends complaining to me every time because they are sitting on there to routing the energy, looking for the whole protection system, because most of the things are now under a IEC 61850. They automatically communicate to each other, and many times based on their setting, they just fail. So they really, I don't know, when they decided this regulation, they should be taking the protection system engineers on board and have a good conversation with them that what is best for them to maintain the system.
I think they're all fishing on the bay.
Okay. Any questions? Oh, okay, Rebecca, please.
Thank you, Chantal. Yes, I have the microphone, which means I get the next question. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. I understand more about the issue than I have in years. One question I had is whether or not the current processes that are being run to review the market rules at present by the Energy Security Board and others are going to look at this issue?
There are a couple of committees that are running, one for the minister, one for the arena, one for the MO. There are several of them running, but the problem is they are not on the same page. They are doing based on what they see is important. Most of the target is to reduce the energy prices rather than helping renewable to come in. And whichever way the calculation or system modeling show that somehow the customer electricity price is going to go down, government will follow that.
You can take my.
Hi, Charlie Nags is my name. You talked a little bit there about the fact that there's no real-time pricing in transmission and distribution markets at the moment. And we hear a fair bit about, cost-reflective pricing solving a whole bunch of different issues. I'm just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, talk about whether you see, are we heading in that direction, and how do you see that
we
kind of
want
playing
to,
out?
but there are huge investment in the transmission grids because they need a lot of money and our country is very long. And we need to return some profit on this investment. And those people who run those faces a very hard task. And another problem, they have a chance to blame rooftop solar, because let's say you are financially affluent and you put a rooftop solar and we're getting 11 cents per kilowatt hour, but your neighbor is not financially affluent, but he's not getting that power in even 12 cents or 16 cents. He's paying more, right? So how can we make a fair case for both? If you could sell the PV power real time to your neighbor using the same distribution system, that could be one way to go with the residential storage, as well as if you are using more power, let's say your average monthly load is 15 kilowatt hour, you pay on the ratio of 15 kilowatt hour, and someone's average monthly load is 9 kilowatt hour, he pays supply charge based on that. Also, we create transmission system pricing like a block, morning, evening, peak load, not peak hour, rather than whenever the system is heavily loaded, only charged based on that. So this is the some of the ways we can really go with to reduce the electricity prices, but it's not going to be easy because a lot of business involved, investment involved in the transmission system. If they are not making profit, nobody going to invest in these new transmission systems and other parts. So I don't know how this is possible. Somehow Western Australia is still government funded, but in the power market, we have a big challenge. This is really policy makers, financial people, law-making people, and as well as the technology needs to come together to find the best solution.
One last question. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. That was very, very, very informative. Steve Coltis is my name. Based on some of the modeling that you have done, and in relation to one of the stats I saw up there regarding the amount of renewable energy that's produced in Australia relative to the existing demand, where do you foresee the total amount of renewable energy actually getting to as a portion of total supply, if in fact, yeah, obviously the smart grid, our technology is a significant part of that being a success. I'm actually working in a sort of a competing sector to renewable energy, and it's interesting to hear the arguments for and against large scale production versus incoming solar and wind power. But obviously a properly functioning, properly regulated smart grid appears, based on what you presented, to be very positive in the future. I just wondered, what are your models saying if it's successful?
First of all, we cannot run grid 100% renewable. We always will need some sort of backup power. Whether it's coal, whether it's gas, whether it's nuclear, does not matter. Probably you're going to depend on the gas because it can handle the energy quickly. Until the big, quick energy storage is coming in, renewable will never be the main player, but it can go all the way to 70% to 80% of the total energy mix. Especially for those colder days where there is no wind blowing and there is no sunlight at the night, we still need to depend on the traditional generation. We cannot probably create a huge pumped storage to supply the whole Australia. That's impossible. However, on the customer domain, where is the rooftop solar, we can't stop this integration. This will increase every year. And once the battery, a small battery energy storage become cheaper, then many of the customers might probably will go even off grid. So in that domain, which is very near to the retailer and the distribution, the intake of rooftop PV will increase every year, because it's a double-edged sword now. The more energy price increases, the more people take the rooftop solar. So it's a spiral effect happening around there, and the prices are going down. Also, with people's use of IoT, everything can be internet connected. Your washing machine, your dryer, your refrigerator, everything. And I did a research where we created a home energy management system for Denso in Japan, where automatically, based on the forecasting and optimization, everything is designed for you. You sell energy only when you get the best price, not every time. You sometimes charge your residential battery and never sell to the grid. Supply it to your own load in the peak time because you have a time of use rate. So those sort of small innovation startup companies will come and play in the customer domain where the intake will be very high. But in a large scale, we're going to always need either gas, coal, or a mix of these generators.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you for all the questions. So we have another seminar coming next week, this time by Professor Andreas Loschel, the energy transition and the politics of coal in Germany. So I really hope to see you guys there and the ladies there too. Thank you, Manoj. So let's all give Manoj a big hand for his presentation. Thanks.